It's Dean Taraborelli's specialty to help you reprogram your life forever. Addictions of all kinds have a core issue, and the Healing Sanctuary Center can help you recover and start living your dreams. Welcome everyone to the Pollinating the Planet with Love show. I'm your host, Beth Bell, and I'm here in the beautiful, I'm outside of Sedona a little, and I'm here with Dean Taraborelli. He's the founder, administrator, and counselor at the Sanctuary in Sedona, Arizona. He has a BA in political science and is currently senior teaching staff at Four Winds Society, an international school of energy medicine. His credentials also include being an ordained minister, a certified shamanic breathwork facilitator, a founding member of the Society for Shamanic Practitioners, and a member of National Institute for Holistic Addiction Studies. Dean has traveled extensively to sacred sites in over 60 countries. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Beth. That was a mouthful there.
I know. Well, we have a lot to talk about, and I'm really excited to be here. I got introduced to you from someone who's been here at the Sanctuary, and it just seemed like a magical fit to hear all about your life journey and some of the great pearls of wisdom that you have to share with the world. So I oftentimes start out with a very basic question, which is, what did you think you were going to be when you were a young boy, and are you doing that now?
Well, I thought I was going to be an astronaut when I was a young boy, and no, I'm not doing that now.
Yes.
Although exploring consciousness is...
You are doing some space travel, yes.
So are doing that. One of the interesting things that has really landed for me, when I was younger, it's sort of you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you work your way up, and that's kind of what you do. So that's what I did. And that really wasn't what I was supposed to do. So while I had all the trappings of success there, I was pretty successful. I was so empty inside. Yeah. So now I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, but I never would have thought that I would be doing this.
Now, one of the things I heard you talk about is at 12 years old, you found yourself with marijuana. Is that right? Did I get that story right?
Yeah, you did. So at 12, it's interesting because I have no memory before that. So, and I didn't understand why until fairly recently. But at 12 years old, I get some marijuana, and all of a sudden, I feel okay. And, that progressed to doing it, all day, every day. And I got pretty good at hiding it. And that's important in the story later. And then that switched to alcohol. And these are relatively socially acceptable. And that then led to my first drug treatment experience. I couldn't stop. And so, hey, what do? You go to treatment. And I followed instructions right to the T for 5 years. I was diligent right up to the time where I drank again. And then, so I'm in and out of rehab a few times. Then I discover opiates. I get an operation on my mouth. And the next thing I know, I'm taking 100 Percocet a day with a whole bunch of benzos to go to bed at night. That's going on for 5, 6, 7 years. So that's a heavy habit. And during this time, I'm going to rehab a lot. Like I have a lot to live for. I have people that care about me. Yeah. I have no real reason for doing this, right? I go to rehab and you hear people's stories. They have these horrible things happen to them, and I'm like, well, none of that happened to me. Why is it that I'm destroying myself? And I didn't understand that until later. So.
Right, because one of the things I hear you talk about is that there's always a core issue.
There's always a core issue, and we can talk about 100% of the time, and this is well known now, whether it's a physical thing, inflammation, which is invisible to people, or some unprocessed emotions that will come and alter our behavior later in our lives. Yeah. So in the height of this thing, I've got this horrible opiate addiction going. It goes to heroin and blah, blah, blah. And during that time, I'm trying to manage my company, and I'm in all these horrendous places, and I'm trying to manage this other life. Like the amount of energetic overhead for this, like I'm either needing the next drug, or else I'm going to be sicker than most people understand, or I'm trying to stop this thing. Yeah. And so rehab after rehab after rehab, and at the same time I'm going around the world. If I heard of a doctor or a shaman or a mystic or cleric or something, I would go see them. then one day, I'm in my last rehabilitation experience. I'm at the end of my life, like I have no energy left. And I mean, during my little trauma drama stories, I mean, I have some doozies just like everybody else, but I mean, I've been clinically dead a couple of times. I've overdosed in the countless times, hospitalized, you know, all those kinds of things. And so I'm at this last center, and I guess I had this tiny little flicker in there left. And so one day I'm sitting there, and somehow I get a different perspective on this thing. I'm able to look down on this whole thing, and I realize, wait a second, two things came into my awareness. And one of them was I paid such strict attention in treatment. And while all my counselors, you know, these are well-meaning people, but well-meaning and well are two different things. And so you can get a degree and do all that stuff without actually doing your own internal process work.
Right.
And the second thing I realized was that I'm not the only one that this isn't working for.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's getting it, because I knew a lot of people, most of my friends. And
well, and you'd done like 10 centers and, I mean, really integrative things. It sounded like there was one thing that was very risky that you did. So you tried it all.
I've tried it all.
Yeah.
I mean, back in the day, rapid opiate detox, now it's a little bit different. Like back in the day, you know, at one point, I mean, it was underground at that time, but I, you know, did it anyway. And because I was desperate, like I was desperate to get on the other side of this. And as I'm sitting here realizing that this isn't working, all of a sudden something clicks, and I'm like, wait a second, we need a new model. And I thought about it, Beth, and I'm like, okay, so what am I good at? What do I like to do? Well, being in treatment, because you're talking about like real things, this is what makes people tick, you know, all the things that are very interesting, kind of like why people watch reality TV shows now. You get like inside of people's lives, not that I'm in any way a proponent of that, but so I'm like, well, gee whiz, I can't stay as a patient the whole time. And then the download for the different model came, and it came just like a vision. It came, I mean, it was crystal clear, and for the first time in my life, I knew what I was going to do.
Wow. And then how did that actually happen?
Well, it's a good thing I didn't know now all the things I'd have to go through, right? So I decided, look, I know more about this topic than any counselor I have ever sat in front of. Like, I've been all over the world. I understand all these different things. Let's create a model. So many synchronistic things happened. I had already bought a house in Sedona while I was in rehab on the East Coast. And that's totally outside of my financial and kind of worldview at that time. But something made me do it. My last treatment was in Arizona. And I'm like, I'm going to go to Sedona and create this center. And I think the most important thing about it was the decision. Like, this was not a casual decision. This was like 100% of my force went into this thing. And it didn't even occur to me that it may not happen, that it may not work. Like, that wasn't even an option for me at that time.
I love that story because I oftentimes talk about intuitive risk-taking. Right? You don't necessarily have all the details as to why you're taking that risk, but when you know, and then you got to follow it.
I think, you know, one of the things that the universe wants is evolution, right? And so if we look at, you know, entry, most things are breaking down, you know, so mountains will fall to the sea, blah, blah, blah. The one thing that seems to defy that is life. Life seems to want to express in more complex patterns. So if we look at the brain, if we just look at life on Earth, it's getting more complex. And so when I had this idea, what was interesting is there was a need for it, right? This whole paradigm of traditional treatment, like has been done and is still being done, there was a room for something else, like an expanse, kind of like sometimes we go hiking in Sedona, you know, a tree will be growing out of a rock. It wanted to happen there. Like, it defies all odds, but life wants to happen. So this project wanted to happen, and I was just guided. And it wasn't by my, like, expertise of running a center. I didn't know the first thing about running a center at that time, which was, in some way, you know, there's no model to look at. hey, how do these people do these different things? We had to create ours from scratch. And the interesting thing about that was, yes, while it's more challenging, the other side is there are no constraints, right? There are no rules about what it needs to be or not be. So it's unlimited when we don't have that model.
Yeah.
And I think people watching this probably have an idea. And what we share with people here is through our own life experience, we get certain lessons. Yeah. And so let's say you and I decide to go to engineering school, and so we graduate and we have the same degree, we have the same skill set.
Yeah.
But our other curriculum of life, all our ups and downs and our triumphs and tribulations, are a unique set of curriculum that's mine. Yeah. That means I have something unique to offer the world. And I think what the world wants is unique things, because that's biodiversity, diversity of ideas. It's how new things happen. It's evolution. Yeah. And we live in an evolving universe and an evolving consciousness. You know, it's either grow or die. If you look at nature, that's how it happens. So for people out there that have this idea, I would say, you know, don't hold back. Don't try to be like other people, because that's already being done. Yeah. And you got to try something completely different. And we hit some bumps along the way. Yeah. You know, it's quite a story how we got all this going.
So you're in rehab on the East Coast. You buy a place in Sedona. You get the download that you're doing this center, and then you arrive here and things just start to align, it sounds like.
We're in the most perfect place. It's kind of like a monastery, you know. But it's very challenging to build things here. You know, we're down this dirt road, and you know, the power and the things and all the utilities. So during this process, it was so interesting. You know, I have this architect that was married to Frank Lloyd Wright's daughter. We designed all these buildings. You know, the sanctuary was built from the ground up. Every stone here is put in a place to help create an experience for the people that come here. And so we go a couple of years getting the permits and the designs and the things, and all of a sudden we get it. And then the builder goes, well, okay, now we need the money. And it didn't even occur to me that we wouldn't get the money, but I hadn't started looking for the money, and so it was some giant amount of money. And I went and got it twice, and the deal fell through right at the last minute. And so many turning points in the story of the sanctuary, but at that time I was pretty defeated, and I had extended my building permits, you know, like way more than the law allows. And so I get a call from the county, and they say, you know, hey, I don't know why we're going to renew these permits again, you know. The guy's a little hostile on the phone. And I said, you know what, let him go. I'm done. And an hour later I get this call, and he's like, you better get down here. So at that time, I had just met Kelly, who was a land use attorney at that time. So I called her up and I said, hey, I think I'm in trouble. You better come up here. So we go to this meeting, and, you know, there's a bunch of people around this boardroom, and there's a TV set with the county seat and a bunch of people around that table. And they're all hemming and hawing about this thing. And people are asking, well, who told him he could do these different things? And finally, kind of the bad cop in the matter looks at me and he goes, look, you can't quit. We're not letting you quit. And you got 6 months to fix these buildings that you have, or we're going to violate you, and you get to work. And
wow, that'll do it.
So, and interestingly enough, I left the meeting with Kelly, and I said, have you ever seen that before? And she's like, no. Somehow these guys wanted it. You know, they knew that this was like, there was such passion in this thing that we were like partners, you know. They knew I was just a guy that didn't know the first thing about building stuff and all that. And so that was one of thousands of things that kept me going.
Yeah. Now, being in that flow, like having the universe support you, you know, really feeling like you're doing your purpose. A lot of people want that, and they haven't found that yet. Any tips or thoughts as to how to help people get into their flow and their purpose? Because I know you're all about purpose.
Well, the purpose, you know, if we look at why purpose is important, and you know, for me, I can only give you my own perspective. Purpose gives our lives a meaning, you know, it's a meaning. And what's interesting is meaning is the most important thing about life, because your life means whatever you decide that it means. So if life is a drudgery and I'm just trying to get through the day, well, that's what my life means. And if my life is mystical and magical, that's what it means. And I get to decide that. The same way people would say, God, marriage is the most fabulous thing, or marriage is the worst thing. That's the meaning that they've assigned to this thing. And so another thing about purpose is, it's the nature of all living things. So I'm out here in the desert, and you look at all these little insects and plants. You know, this plant protects that plant, this insects eat that, this does that, and that. They all fit together in this tapestry of life in symbiotic relationship. And when we are connected to our purpose, we are connected to that. And then we are making a contribution. Yes. And that's why service is part of every spiritual tradition on the planet. And you know, I didn't know that back in kind of the 12-step days where they said, you come in and make coffee, but service, really, we're of service to life. So I think that when people can find something that's going to be of service to life that they love doing, all of a sudden we get in the flow, because I'm worried about being of service to this greater thing, and nature seems to support that. When we hit all the green lights, we're in the flow. When I'm 3 hours late to the plane and my plane is 5 hours late, I'm in the flow, right? You know, but when I'm bumping into all kinds of obstacles, then I'm probably not in the flow. So that doesn't mean we don't have things that we have to contend with, but it's really a pretty subjective thing to know whether I'm hitting resistance or these are just other obstacles that I need to get over in this great journey of my own evolution to bring this thing forth.
Yes. Well, one of the things that comes to mind is all about connection, how important connection is. So I want to talk about this, but we're going to take a quick break because I want to talk about inner wisdom. I know you're all about inner wisdom as well and connection to that. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Yeah, thanks.
Blossom Bliss products are designed to help empower pure love and purpose in your life. It's through the power of words, flowers, and symbols that our products assist you in creating a blissful life. The power of words in our mini mantra word bar necklaces assist you in setting and blossoming your personal intentions. The affirmation cards leverage the power of flowers by providing daily inspiration. And the power of symbols in our life journey bracelets are great reminders of the things that bring us peace, joy, and love. Products are made and blessed in Bali with love by Balinese artisans who work with empowered hearts. When you purchase jewelry with a bee charm, we donate to save the bees. Join us in pollinating the planet with love. Go to our website, blossomblissbali.com. Again, that's blossomblissbali.com.
Okay, we're back, and I'm here with Dean. We're at the sanctuary in Sedona, Arizona, and we just came from a break, and we wanted to talk about connection, and connection to inner wisdom, because we talked about flow, and being in the flow also has a lot to do with being connected to that inner wisdom.
Yeah. Well, if we talk about connection, and number one, we're wired for that. So if you look at the cultures that have been successful on the planet, they're cooperative and not competitive. Yeah. This connection thing also has to do with sort of when people talk about spirit, and if we look at the energy that creates the spiral of a nautilus shell, which is the Fibonacci sequence,
yes.
Right? And then the energy that organizes a tornado in its spiral, and then the spiral of the Milky Way galaxy. This is all the same energy. There's something that's organizing that, right? Yes. And if that affects all of that, it has to affect me. Right? There's no creature special enough or unique enough on the planet that this energy doesn't affect them. Right. So that's this greater connection. But I think for us...
well, and I should tell you, because you may not know that I've become known as the flower whisperer, because the flowers ended up being my divine portal for me to really understand the bigger energy matrix of what's happening and Mother Nature. And Mother Nature is just such an incredible medicine healer, which I know you also work a lot with. But yeah, so you were going to say.
Well, the cool thing is, Buddha said, hey, if you understand a flower, you understand the whole universe. And
I didn't know he said that.
well,
Okay.
So, and these same Fibonacci sequence, all these things show up in nature. So if we look at nature, is one of the most spiritual things that there is. And so when you talk about nature, when we can connect to nature, it helps us to connect to our inner nature. And in this culture that we live in, with plastic and cell phones and Wi-Fi's and all the things that are so distractive for people and so interesting, the internet, greatest thing, I can Skype somebody in on the other side of the world in real time.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And I have these little phone devices I can watch, just like on Star Trek. There's a person in there and we're talking real time. And we've never been more disconnected from our own selves and our own inner wisdom. But I think inner wisdom, we can look at it a few different ways. So from a scientific way, we have neurons in our gut. We have neurons in our heart. We actually have the vagus nerve that's bringing all information from different organs right up into my limbic brain. If we talk about, but we've heard this expression, trust your gut. Well, your gut is processing things in a different way than the mind. So therefore, it's a quality of information. What's interesting is that a lot of people have gut issues. And that's when we talked about one of the causes of addiction, inflammation, sends a signal to your brain that you're not okay. Of course, it's unconscious, but it creates anxiety, depression, those things. Follow your heart. That's another one we've heard, right? And our heart processes information differently than my brain, no better or worse. But if we think about...
Our heart processes information oftentimes before our brain.
It sure does. And actually, our heart is sending more information to the brain than our brain is sending to the heart. So our heart is like our central intelligence. And the interesting thing, it is not guided by logic like the brain. It's guided by love. So if we look at the difference between, the heart process and the brain process, let's say I meet somebody and I fall in love and they live on the East Coast. And I get this idea, I want to go have dinner tonight with her, but I have to be back here at meditation at 7. So I look at the flights. I can do it. There's a 2-hour window. It's $5,000 for this ticket. My brain goes, gosh, that's silly. That's a silly idea. My heart goes, do it. Go do it. And so, again, not that one is better than the other, but if I stay here, then I'm missing all of this other information, and I'm actually then missing the subtle clues and cues from the universe. Something in my intuition, so interesting, how I got to Sedona in the first place. I was in a rehabilitation center on the East Coast. I get a call from my now ex-wife, who's this amazing person. He goes, we need to go to Sedona. And I said, why? She said, I don't know. So 2 weeks later, she has this postcard, and one author that is very inspirational to me in my journey, Gregg, was speaking in Sedona. And I had this Mondo project at work, and I used to work like 363 days a year. So I have these two things, and I'm like, okay, let me get 2 passes. I was in rehab for a long time, so I could get passes to get in and out. My counselor says, I'm only going to give you 1. And 99.99999% of the time, I'd have gone to work because I have this big thing to do. But I said, no, you got to go to Sedona. And I went, and that's what planted the whole seed. And interesting enough, when I got back and I spent about an hour on this project, and I said, yeah, this, and this, and got it anyway. So that's, but if I didn't trust my guidance, I would have never got there.
Yes. Inner wisdom. So connecting so that you can sort of connect out into the greater field of intelligence. I like to think of the quantum field, the universe. What are your tips as to how people can do this? I know everybody kind of has their own journey in their own way and their own method, but you help people find that here.
We do. And so if we want to do that, I guess it depends on really how deep you want to get. The cleaner we can get, naturally, the more I can trust my own guidance. And then, so if I'm stuck in fight or flight, for example, and the stress of the modern world does that for people, unprocessed emotional baggage does that. If I'm kind of looking at the world from a survival place, naturally my choices are going to be narrower. So I will see danger where there's opportunity, and I'll miss opportunities. So we have to be healthy.
Yes.
And clean up our brain. So we have to repair the brain. We have to repair the gut. We have to kind of spend a little time working on the things that are bogging us down and keeping us trapped in the past. Because if you want to create something, if I'm still running the programs of the past, I'm going to recreate the past somehow.
Right. And a lot of times people don't know what programs they're even running, which is the big problem.
People don't.
The core issue.
This is, and actually 95% of your brain is unconscious. So it's like having the Pentagon mainframe back there, and then my conscious mind is my little iPhone. So I wake up and I say, you know what? I'm going to have a great day. I'm going to be really nice to my people. I'm going to spend 2 hours working on my dream. And this big mainframe computer says, oh, no, you don't. You don't have time, and you're not even worthwhile, and that's never going to happen, so don't do it. And then at the end of the day, I wonder, why did I go and do this disempowering thing? Why? And people's behavior is driven by their unconscious mind, which is also the storage place of all our beliefs, all of the things that we've been programmed as kids. Think about a way to understand that is, we have all had people that we know, of course not us, but people we know, they'll say, I will never grow up to be like my mother or father.
Yep.
And what happens? They grow up exactly like that because they were programmed that way. And even though that's maybe the last thing they want. So we have to get all that worked out. Then
sometimes it's ancestral. It's even your
you
mother's
bet.
mother or your father's father, or things that have happened, the traumas that they've carried at a cellular level.
They do.
Yes.
And what's interesting now, we know that actually DNA transmits memory, not just like the energy of the trauma, but the memory.
Yeah, isn't that amazing to think? Yes.
And so, the cleaner we can get the vessel, and what's interesting is people will feel a million times better, they're clearer, they have more energy. Then we got to tap into, okay, what's real? And a way that we need to do that is through some basic kind of self-care things. Like, for me, I can just tell you what I do. I always go outside in the morning for X amount of time. And so in the traditional societies, they go out and greet the sun. I spend a little time in meditation every day, just kind of quiet, And then I will also set an intention for the day. Okay, what would I like to do? And when we think about an intention, it's just like having a shopping list to go to the grocery store. If I have a shopping list, my chances of getting those products are much better than just kind of wandering around.
Yeah.
So if I set an intention, my chances of actually having that happen are better than just kind of wandering through life. And this connection to the greater field that you mentioned is of critical importance, because that's where the download is going to come.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to come.
But sometimes we're not clear on what's really a hit from the heart, or it's our ego mind leading us down another path for sort of that quick fix. And I think that happens a lot in addiction. And we lose our balance to know what's really the heart, the gut, like what's really the intuition versus what's the programming, what's the rush, the emotional rush that we want. So how do we actually differentiate when we're in the real heart-centered, gut-centered hit place versus the I want to hit place, if that makes sense?
Yeah, in the way I spend most of my days, that makes total sense.
Yes.
Because people want that dopamine hit. That's what social media is all about, right?
Right, because you don't have to be a drug addict to be in this conversation. I mean, this is something people struggle with every day. We want hits we want the external world to make us feel better, but it's about being internal and knowing how to feel better so that we then project that into our external. But so how do we know the difference?
Yeah,
between
I think, and look, let's take addiction out of it. Now anxiety has become the number one diagnosed thing.
Yeah.
Depression, the second diagnosed thing. These are symptoms. So while they are diagnosable mental illness, they are also symptoms. Why are people depressed? Why? And it's chemical imbalance has never been proven to be the cause of depression. It is the result of depression. Mm-hmm. So at any rate, and this applies to pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want to know more about what makes them tick and what their real dreams are?
Yeah.
And so, again, we have to clean all this stuff up. But, when I think about the things that I fantasize about, so I have my kind of lower brain fantasies about, I try not, it doesn't not a factor anymore, but when we think about like money and power and sex, having all these kinds of things, those are all kind of these dopamine hits that you're talking about. Hey, how many likes did I get on Facebook, And, but down deep, when we think about something that's going to serve not only me, but the greater good, and something that gets me like excited. So people are thinking about, if you fantasize about being on the Oprah show or being on the Beth Bell show or singing with Mick Jagger, whatever, that's an indication about what's true for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe I'm not going to be in the Rolling Stones, but that means I have a creative outlet that wants to come, and so probably my gift, my journey is going to be more about creativity, letting something out that's in. And that's what I think really this is all about. Everybody's got something in here. And, they say, there's this little cliche that says, don't die with your song in you.
Yes.
Don't die with your medicine in you. As people get close to death, it's their regrets about what they didn't do. And I think that's what this whole show is about. How do we transcend our fears? So I take the risks. And because I'll share with you that your dream is outside of your comfort zone.
Yes.
Right? It's not going to be in there. And if you make time, I've got 2 hours that I'm going to, because I have the kids, the mortgage, all these things. And these are all real. I'm not in any way saying, oh my God, go be in a monastery and write your book. But we have to make ourselves available for our dream. We have to decide what it is that we're making ourselves available to.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised at how people develop coping strategies to mask pain that then keep them from their dreams.
Yes.
It keeps them safe.
Yes.
So.
Well, this might be a bit of a jump, but one of the things I really want to hear you talk about, because I've heard a little bit, is soul sickness. Let's talk about that, because I think it all fits together as to, the core issues, the why we have these behaviors, why we can't get out of some of the behaviors that are not serving our higher good, and this soul sickness idea.
Well, in order to understand soul sickness, let's talk about what is the soul. And I've sat across...
And the soul versus the spirit.
Yeah, okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
So when we think about, and I've sat across from thousands of people, and this always comes up. Okay, so what is the soul? And even people that have no spiritual connection, no real connection to anything outside of kind of Western medicine, they seem to understand that the soul is important. And by and large, everybody, when they might use different descriptors, say, this is my essence, like my core self. And I'll ask people, hey, do you think your soul is addicted or depressed or, and by and large, the answer is like, no.
Yeah.
So it's my purest place. And if we think about little kids are typically more connected to this, right? They have their invisible friends and they can talk to trees, and who's to say they can't, until something beats or educates or makes fun of them or whatever, and that stuff gets kind of taken away from them because people say, oh, you can't do that. Oh, that's silly. Time to get in the real world. Yeah. But this soul part, this creative part of us, what will happen for people is that either one event or a trauma, and trauma is very subjective. A trauma can be as simple as your mother telling you to shut up and your voice is like nails on a chalkboard, or getting beaten and locked in the basement. We can't say for each person, what is trauma with a capital T or a small t. And so now the world ceases to be safe. And so now I build up all kinds of structures to protect myself, and I get further and further away from who I really am. And I'm beginning to feel listless and lifeless and bored and in the drudgery of life rather than the excitement of life. And so as people get further and further away from their truest self, and so if you're looking at your guidance, that's going to come from your truest self, not your wounded self. What's left over, this wounded self that I have to learn to medicate or go to the gym for 50 hours a day or work really hard or somehow get those dopamine hits. And so we call that soul sickness. And it's so interesting in my shamanic training, these people are highly intelligent and they're good healers. They understand the psyche, they understand the soul. And I say that in those cultures, there are many, 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 many ways, many kinds of people, and only one way of being sick, soul sickness. In our Western medicine, there's a million ways of being sick. I think there's like 16,000 diagnoses out there now, and only one kind of person. So, it's you're this and you have any of these number of things. And I think the former, when we lose track of ourselves, all of a sudden we get symptoms.
Yeah.
Because then I lost track of what's right for me. What are the right relationships for me? What's the right occupation for me?
But oftentimes when we get the symptoms, we're so numb that we still don't even listen to our body, right?
Yeah.
We feel it in our energy bodies, but we don't feel it a lot of times because of the numbness.
And then we'll take a pill and that makes us number.
Mm-hmm.
Number, or, look at people, obesity problem, that's all this insulation. How can we ever feel things?
Yeah.
And so the soul, we have to get in touch with this soul part. And so in the traditional societies, they call it soul retrieval. I have to bring this part back. And in order to bring the part back, I have to heal what is keeping it from coming back, because the limbic brain can't tell time. So, hey, a thing might have happened 30 years ago, but I'm still replaying it back here unconsciously, so it's not safe for this part to come home. But once this part comes home, I'll share a little story with you. When I was little, I didn't say much. My voice, I was made fun of for my voice as a little kid, and somewhere along the line, I just didn't, I didn't think I had much to offer really verbally. And so I get this soul retrieval, and I did all the follow-up work that I was supposed to. And a couple months later, I'm standing in this circle of people, and something comes out of my mouth. And I looked around, I'm like, who said that, And I haven't been able to shut up since, And so we get our essence back. And you ask the difference between the soul and the spirit, and I can give you my, the way I would look at that. If we look at spirit is the totality of everything. Mm-hmm. So it's the whole cosmos, it's the quantum field, it's God, it's that creative life force. So that's the whole thing. But I'm part of that, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, spirit is working, it's affecting everything all the time. So again, if it can spin up hurricanes and that same energy in me, so my soul is kind of the interface. It's my individualized expression of spirit. Mm-hmm. So if we would use an analogy of, hey, spirit's the ocean. Well, here's a wave, and this wave, it's its own unique thing. Look at it, it's so many feet high, and it's so beautiful, and there's people surfing in there, and all kinds of stuff. And that wave exists as its own unique expression for a little while, until it gets reabsorbed back into the mix.
I like that. I like that description. Yeah, that's helpful to see how we're all part of the whole.
Yeah.
And all interconnected.
We're all in the same ocean,
We are. All right, there's so much more to talk about. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back.
Blossom Bliss products are designed to help empower pure love and purpose in your life. It's through the power of words, flowers, and symbols that our products assist you in creating a blissful life. The power of words in our mini mantra word bar necklaces assist you in setting and blossoming your personal intentions. The affirmation cards leverage the power of flowers by providing daily inspiration. And the power of symbols in our life journey bracelets are great reminders of the things that bring us peace, joy, and love. Products are made and blessed in Bali with love by Balinese artisans who work with empowered hearts. When you purchase jewelry with a bee charm, we donate to save the bees. Join us in pollinating the planet with love. Go to our website, blossomblissbali.com. Again, that's blossomblissbali.com.
Okay, we're back, and I'm here with Dean, and we're outside of Sedona, Arizona. And so much to talk about, because you have literally gone around the planet physically to many sacred sites. You've been in some of the most probably horrific human situations with some of the addiction that you've overcome. You've been in rehab facilities. You have all of this wealth of knowledge, but now you also are a breathwork facilitator. You master, you understand energy, you understand Mother Nature. How can we tap into this bigger system that, as you just described, this ocean that we are a wave of, how can we do it every day? And does it require ceremony, rituals? You know, what does it actually require of ourselves to know that we're reconnected? Because we're never disconnected. But how do we do that?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And I think, you know, as I said, one of the most important things is we get cleaned up. But what I do is if we look at sort of our Western culture is crisis oriented. So people kind of ignore things until they have a crisis, and then they'll have kind of the crash. And then all they want to do is kind of build themselves up back to where they were.
Right.
And then they'll kind of go back to sleep and have another crisis. And so we keep playing this kind of game, and the crises tend to get more drastic as time goes on. But actually, if people would spend a little time every single day doing things that include some of the things that you just mentioned, one thing that's really, if we look at medicine for the soul and soul sickness as pretty much of a primary thing, because again, if I'm not connected to who I am, nothing is going to feel right, right? Nothing is going to feel right. Well, the soul doesn't respond to language and reasoning. The soul responds to creativity and to ritual. So, and we've lost ritual in our culture a lot. People think it's some kind of sort of weird cultish thing or whatever. What do people do? However, if we look in the main religions, you know, what do? They have a certain ritual that you go in. People go to church, there's a certain format, or they go to the synagogue, there's a certain format. They go to the mosque, there's a certain format. The Buddhists have a certain format that they use for their prayers. And in us, we have ceremonies for graduation ceremony, wedding ceremony. Even happy birthday to you it's a little ceremony that we do. So really, for the soul, we have to bring the ceremony back into life. And why can't going outside to have your cup of coffee in the morning can either be just some unconscious checked out experience, or it can be like a little bit of a ceremony. People are doing this already. So bring consciousness to it. We got to get quiet. So if we look at the brain, when the brain is turbulent, all it can see is itself. So when the brain is calm, all of a sudden I'm open up to greater things. And actually, people's connection to this greater field of information happens through their energy body. And so energy, we all have an energy field. It's very similar to electricity going down a high voltage power line creates a field, and sometimes old radios get static on the radio, and on AM it still happens. Hey, well, you have a spinal column, and all this energy going up and down that spinal creates a field of energy around you. That is actually the antenna to this greater field. And so when my antenna's working, kind of like my immune system, I can use that as an analogy. Hey, when my immune system's working great, somebody sneeze right on me and I don't get sick. If my immune system is compromised through stress or whatever, somebody sneezes on me, I get sick. Well, when my energy system is working optimally, I take in the prana, the chi of the universe, and translates really well and nourishes my body. If my field is compromised through trauma, PTSD, addiction, those kinds of things, it's sort of like your antenna's rusty, the signal is not as robust. So really understanding our energy system.
Well, and one of the things you said was clean up, and it immediately triggered me to want to ask you about the neural pathways, because I think there's a lot of people that want to have that conscious ritual and the gratefulness, which is all great, but there's so much, as we've talked about a little while ago, happening in the background, right? That we're unconscious of, and until we clean up that unconscious stuff, we can do a lot of different rituals, but it's not necessarily going to change. And I feel like that's one of the biggest differences with this center versus some of the others, because it's not woo-woo stuff. I mean, it's like brain science stuff.
This is all based on, every single thing that we do is based on science, everything. And what's interesting is, the body, mind, soul, and spirit, these things are all connected. So if I have something in one, it has to affect the rest. And when I work on all of them, it must, my chances of getting better have to be better. You mentioned neuroplasticity. So if we look at what that is, hey, the more I do something, the more efficient my brain makes it. So we don't think about walking. But a little kid, when they're first learning, oh my God, it's this painstaking thing, because they're developing the circuits that are all going to wire together to make that movement more efficient. When I think about an analogy this way. I get a guitar, I start to play. It's so challenging, every finger movement. But if I keep going, I get good at it because the patterns are similar. So my brain memorizes and creates a little map of circuits that all work together. And if I get really good, I can now sing and play the guitar. And if I get really good, like Keith Richards, I can smoke cigarettes and play the guitar and sing. And so if we now bring that into our real life experience, every time I think about a stressful thing or a fight that I had or some problem that I have, my depression, all the reasons why I can't be successful or my idea won't work, what I'm actually doing is I'm strengthening neural networks that I may not want. So every time I lament about some problem, I'm practicing my instrument and I'm deepening those neural networks. The cool thing about it is now I go to start some other thought process, like I'm a really great guy and I can accomplish this. Well, that's just like picking up a new instrument. It's like, boy, that doesn't feel comfortable at all. But if I keep practicing, just like the guitar, all of a sudden it becomes easier and easier. And if I stop beating myself up, these neural pathways will begin to prune away. And now these become kind of where the energy goes. So to that end, it takes practice. There is no kind of quick fix. We're the pharmaceutical industry. We know what that's all about. Hey, and again, nothing, please don't hear against pharmaceuticals, but they have a place. And I'm not sure that 25% of the brains are defective and need to be on medication. Some do, and again, that's a different conversation.
Well, it's also the collective conscious that wants to just take a pill and not do the soul work.
What's so interesting is, if you ask anybody on the street, hey, do you think it would be beneficial for you to meditate every day? Most people would say, yeah, because they've heard it. And then you say, well, did you do it? And of course they didn't. And because there's something about it that they don't really believe it, because they're not getting that quick fix. It takes work. But if I understood the reward, and if I said to you, Beth, you know what, at the end of a year, if you meditate for half an hour every day, I'll give you $1 million, and you trusted me and trusted that I would do that for you, I promise you would meditate every single day for half an hour because there's a reward there. So we have to, again, get away from this kind of quick hit dopamine thing, and somehow we've been taught in our culture that if it doesn't feel good, like you got to get rid of it. Look at every commercial. It's all about, hey, you don't feel good? Buy this, do this, take this. And even if we look at little kids with their moms in the super, the mom goes, don't cry, don't cry. And meanwhile, she's just trying to calm the person down. But in actuality, what she's saying is don't feel. Don't feel. So we have to feel. And we have to learn that there's, it hurt going in, and it's going to be a little uncomfortable on the way out. But think about it like vomiting. Nobody likes to vomit, but after you do, boy, you feel better because you don't have to digest it still. Once we do the psychological purge, we don't have to keep digesting it. So even though the actual act, and it's way easier than people think, but what's interesting is that what we are looking for here at the sanctuary, we call it a perceptual shift, where a person is inherently different. And when I'm different, all of a sudden the way I'm looking at the world is different, opportunities are different, the world responds in a different way. So this is not about managing my state or controlling my, all my tools and everything. It's about having this shift, and that's what we have to strive for.
Understanding probably the holographic universe, right? That we're just projecting this out into our environment, and the environment is then responding to what we're putting out there.
It's the shadow. So people so Carl Jung talked about the shadow, and the thing about our shadow, which is all our unprocessed, unknown things, we're either going to project it out or we are going to turn it in. And that's kind of the thing. So we have people out there that are doing all kinds of bad sideways things out there that they don't really want to do. And then we have people that are beating themselves up internally, that inner critic. And once I get this thing out, all of a sudden I can now use that instead of having it work against me.
And don't you think as humans that we're all just here to just love and be loved? Isn't it like that simple?
I don't know anybody that would disagree with that. And I think part of the journey you know, I often think about it. If we lived in paradise, right? We live in the Garden of Eden. There's not one issue, right? We have the finest food, the finest friends, the finest this, the finest that. All our needs are met. It's not going to take long before somebody kicks up a little mischief, because that's the human experience, you know. For me, in my own journey, when I realized, wait a second, all this trials and tribulations, 30 years of addiction, 20 years in treatment, all this stuff, like, that was my training. All of a sudden, it made sense. And so then I could appreciate or love this thing and begin to love myself more. I'm like, wow, I got more training than, you know, I could have gone to get a master's, but this is so much.
Our school
like,
is
you know,
good.
what a thing. So, and really, I think you're right about that. We can strip away all of my shielding for protection that keeps me safe, but also keeps me from deeply, intimately connecting with someone.
Yeah.
And as we strip those things, then we can actually feel this thing that everybody is talking about, love. And how can I go deeper into this experience?
Yeah, I love that. Well, the whole Pollinating the Planet with Love mission and movement is all about helping people to find their real purpose so that they can give and receive love unconditionally.
Well, thank you, Beth, and thank you for all that you're bringing out into the world.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I do have one more question for you, though. How do you see the sanctuary helping in pollinating the planet with love? I mean, to me, it seems a little obvious, but I'd love to hear what you think.
Well, you know, in two ways. I realize that my mission really is about, it's twofold. It's about changing the model for mental health in the United States and beyond, because it's not working so well. So, you know, when we first began, we were like a freak show out here in terms of what the treatment industry thought about us. Now everybody's kind of emulating this model. And the second thing is that, you know, helping these people understand that there's nothing wrong with them, that they're out of balance, they've lost their way. We get all these things back again, and then they're going to go out and do something in the world. So really, that's what we're doing, is helping to grow people that are going to go out and offer something, however big or small, you know, even be kinder to their families or whatever the case might be. And then we just really spread the word. We're a community just as much as anything else. It's so interesting. We get alumni back here all the time and visitors. There's always somebody at the dining room table, and not one person has ever come here and not had some kind of a heartfelt experience. And so we are just open that way. That I help is to just show people, you know what, you can overcome the most extraordinary odds and be successful in your way.
Yeah.
And so when people understand that, they get excited. All of a sudden, it's not about stopping some behavior or managing something. It's about, wow, how can I let this thing out? Very similar to what you're doing, but just in a different way.
So anyone who has addiction issues, it doesn't have to be just drugs, right? It can be depression.
It's all these things. If we look at coping strategies, so our big kind of specialties are addiction of any sorts, and that's prescribed medication as well, because much of that is really addictive, or street drugs, people that are doing that. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a biggie. It's a biggie that we're specialized, we're trauma-focused, everything. Depression, anxiety, those are kind of the big hitters that affect so many of us. And but there are so many things that people do to check out and not feel good. And so really, what we're really doing is helping people go through this exploration about what makes them tick. And unfortunately, in our current kind of work model, people call out sick for 2 days, you know, they get frowned upon. When we focus on this set of the population, they know they need to go away for a certain amount of time. And so really it's about, you know, having the time to help a person make a shift. And once one person does, it makes it easier for the next one to follow. So if we look at you know, the 4-minute mile, nobody could break the 4-minute mile until somebody did, and then other people did, and now anybody can do it if they really set their mind to it. So as you go around and do these things and kind of wake people up, it makes it just easy, creating a movement. And we're creating a movement in our own little way.
We're cross-pollinating.
Yeah.
So you have a wonderful website that people can find out all about the center. Now, is there any resources where we can tap into some of your beautiful pearls of wisdom, because some people may not need to be coming to the sanctuary.
Agreed.
But everything that you teach is so relevant to the masses out there. So is there any particular place?
Well, on our website, which is sanctuary.net, there's an ebook that talks a lot about energy medicine and all these different things. I have a chapter in a book that's actually in the Andrew Weil Publishing Library, and it's all about different techniques about mental health. But they asked me for a chapter about shamanism, and that's interesting that that's in such a mainstream book. That is available out there. And then coming up now with another book that we're getting ready, it'll be done by the end of the year. And it's really, it's not focused on addiction. It's about the addiction to our thinking. Like who you are, that's the limitation, right? So all my self-imposed limitations, and what do we do about that? Because
and how hooked we are into the collective consciousness that's not of the higher self.
It's not. Like we are, if you look at our culture, it's kind of out of balance right now.
Yeah,
and so that's actually feeding what's so interesting when people realize, fitting in, being normal in a sick society is not healthy.
No.
So when we understand, well, wait a second, I'm being signaled, and that's what epigenetics is, my environment signaling me to be unhealthy. So we got to overwrite all those things.
Yeah. Such good work. Thank you for everything that you're doing to help humanity and all the individuals that come here, and how that extends beyond exponentially once they leave. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. And thank you for making it to the sanctuary all the way down Cactus Road, in Cornville, Arizona. The fact that you got here is such a miracle, and just shows your dedication. And so when we first met via email, I looked at your website, got really excited about your visit. So thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. So, okay. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Beth.
Yes. And wishing you all bliss so that you too can help in pollinating the planet with love.
Yeah. Blessings.
Hear who's up next when you like my page, Beth Bell Live, and join me each week as I invite a new guest into the mobile recording studio to help in pollinating the planet with love.